I want to talk about having courage in difficult times. I'm reminded of Adrian Rogers' story about the guy who bragged that he cut off the tail of a man-eating lion with his pocket knife. When asked why he had not cut off the lion's head, the man replied, "Someone had already done that." It's easy to appear courageous when there's no real threat. But let's talk about finding our courage in difficult times. Because these, my friends, are difficult times we're living in. Yet, if we're honest, on some level, all times are difficult. Because life in general is a pretty precarious undertaking. My colleague Carlton Pearson likes to say that life is a sexually transmitted disease. A sexually transmitted dis-ease. There are thousands of different techniques, many of which are called religion, that are set up to help us deal with this dis-ease of life. Now, some of these religious approaches seem merely to be ways of denying reality. The famous religious scholar Joseph Campbell used the example of P.T. Barnum as he spoke about this. P.T. Barnum, of course, the great circus king of Barnum and Bailey Circus. Back in the early days of the circus, P.T. Barnum was trying to figure out how he could make some more money. He noticed that so many people were gathering around before the circus started. They were coming early, they were coming from far and wide, so he thought, what can I do to get a little more money out of these folks? So he created the sideshow, the circus sideshow, with, filled with the two-headed calf and the snake-skinned man and all kinds of other novelties for folks to come and see. They could pay $1, they could go into the tent and spend some time. Now, he had a problem, though, and that was that, people would look at their watches and they didn't want to leave the tent until it was about time for the circus, and P.T. Barnum wanted to move people out so he could get new people to come on in, and so he had an idea. He took the sign over the door that said exit, and he changed it to say the grand egress. Now, people wanted, they'd already seen the snake-skinned man and they'd seen everything else. They wanted to go see the grand egress, so they walked through the door and found themselves outside of the tent. Religion, in some ways, Campbell explained, has a way of tricking people, making us think something that is much worse than it really is sounds okay or palatable or even good. It's not death, it's the door to paradise. Your life's not over because you'll be reincarnated. What Campbell talked about was that religions have been created by cultures across time, trying to help ease people's anxiety about being alive and knowing that we're going to die. The fundamental and rather unsettling truth about the human condition is that life is filled with uncertainty. There's only two things that we can know with total certainty: change and death. Everything else is speculation. Let me say this another way, and then let's take a moment to pause and really take it in. The one thing that never changes is that everything is always changing. And secondly, we will die, and everyone and everything that we know and love will die. It's even uncertain how and when. The only thing that's certain is that we will. So the human condition is one of almost complete uncertainty. Let's take a breath and let that sink in. Now, there's a wide spectrum of ways that people have learned to deal with this uncertainty. And on one end of the spectrum is hedonism and nihilism. There are those who say, since we cannot possibly know anything for certain, we cannot possibly know what is right and what is wrong with any amount of surety, so all ideas of morality are simply inventions. And at the extreme of this thinking is hedonism, or a life of seeking self-pleasure without concern for others. We see this expressed in the bumper sticker, "The one who dies with the most toys wins." This response to uncertainty says that since we cannot know, I'm going to pursue my own happiness. So narcissism and materialism and greed and lust for power and pleasure become the driving force of a hedonistic life. And on this end of the spectrum, alongside hedonism, is nihilism or meaninglessness. They will say that because we cannot know for certain anything, we cannot know for certain that life has any meaning, and at the extreme response to this is a sense of utter meaninglessness. Now, way over on the other end of this spectrum of responses to life's uncertainty are fundamentalisms. Religious fundamentalism, but also other forms of totalitarian thinking, including certain historic examples of communism, fascism, and today, terrorism. Now, at this end of the spectrum, people are saying life is full of uncertainty, so I'm going to take a leap of faith over that uncertainty, and I'm going to believe with total certainty in this. It could be a religious idea, like our true reward is in the next life. It can make people feel much better about the troubling conditions of this life, knowing that they will spend eternity in comfort. Or it could be a political ideology, such as Hitler's idea of social evolution and the survival of the fittest, that caused his followers to kill those who were deemed to be polluting the gene pool because they were convinced that they were meant to be part of a super race. Now, many of the white supremacists who have become activated recently in our country are white men who are not succeeding very well. And they believe that as white men, they're meant to succeed, and because they are better than everyone else. They believe that white men created everything worthwhile that exists today, and so since they're not succeeding, there must be something wrong. And they're being told that the thing that is wrong is that our country is being overrun by people who are not white and ruining it for them. They see their purpose in life to make America white again, and they believe that they are the pinnacle of human existence. Now, in a similar way, religious fundamentalists of all stripes, be they Muslims or Christians, Hindus or others, believe that their religion is the pinnacle of religion. And they are on a mission to create a world dominated by their faith. Just as white supremacists think that America and the world is a mess because white people are not completely dominant and in charge, religious fundamentalists think that the world is a mess because their religion is not dominant and in charge. And this end of the spectrum over here, people's lives are filled with an incredible sense of meaning. Life's uncertainties are subsumed in the clarity about their purpose and God's objectives. Now, here at All Souls, we try to tread a middle path on this spectrum. We are not afraid to look at death and uncertainty and to confront the possibilities of meaninglessness. And yet, we are also committed to working towards our understanding of a better world. What this means is that in our community, we are asked to take a stand on issues that help bring what we value and decide is of value into the world. But we do so knowing that we cannot possibly have 100% certainty about what is right and what is wrong, and yet we act anyway with our hearts and our best thinking at any given moment. And we stay open to learning that we could be wrong, and if so, we're open to changing our course. Now, this takes courage. It takes courage to confront life's uncertainty and meaninglessness and death. It takes courage to stand up to what we think is right. And it takes courage to consider that we could be wrong and to change course if we discover that we are. Now, 20th century theologian Paul Tillich wrote a well-known book from which I took the title of this message, The Courage to Be. In it, he says that it is in these decisions to be courageous that we affirm life and the meaning of our existence. Tillich, like us, lived in uncertain times, fraught with increasing anxiety. He wrote in the aftermath of the Second World War, people were living for the first time with the reality of nuclear weapons and the ability of a handful of people to destroy nearly all life on this planet with the push of some buttons. Suddenly, the actions and decisions of a few human beings could destroy all life. Maybe not cockroaches, I understand, but you get the point. And with industrialization and urbanization, people were no longer using their hands to produce their daily goods, and were more and more cut off from the means of production of the things that made their lives possible. Life in cities changed the nature of community, cut many people off from a sense of neighborliness, no longer connected to the land, no longer connected to neighbors. People more and more were becoming like cogs of a big wheel, no longer connected to the results of their labor or its profits. All of this increased people's sense of estrangement. At the same time, science was progressing, and cultural diversity was becoming more common in urban life. So traditional ideas about religion and God came into question for so many people. And so even these long-standing traditional religious ways of dealing with the uncertainty of life were no longer working to give people's lives meaning. And Paul Tillich spoke into this moment, and he offered people a way of understanding their existential anxieties. And so I'm not surprised that in our current times, I found myself turning to Tillich. He encouraged people to embrace their doubts and face the reality of death and meaninglessness. And he said that it is when we stare these things in the face and accept them that life's true meaning emerges. He saw much of the art and the music and the philosophy of the 20th century as a kind of radical creative negativity that points to a deeper hope. He wrote, "The act of accepting meaninglessness is itself a meaningful act." His point was that once we face the no's of our existence, we discover a yes that is even more profound and life-giving. No, we will not live forever. No, we cannot protect the people we love from harm and death. No, we cannot control many of the events of our lives. No, we will not always get it right, and we will make mistakes and hurt others and feel guilty. No, we cannot always find objective meaning and know for certain what's wrong and what's right. He said, we discover life's beauty and truth not by denying these realities. We discover what matters most by facing them. Now, I've always appreciated the story of the Jews in the concentration camp during World War II who decided to put God on trial. They held a mock trial right there in the concentration camp, and they had 3 rabbis be the judges. When the trial was over, the verdict was in, and it was unanimous. God was guilty. The people looked at the rabbis and they asked, "What do we do now?" And the rabbis said, "Let's pray." What I love about this story is that in the midst of a terrible and tragic and dangerous times, they had the audacity and the courage to question God and their religion and values. They were so courageous, in fact, that they discovered that the God that they had been worshiping and centering their lives around was not a God worth following. In their case, when they discovered this startling truth, they did not give up on God. They presumably gave up on their way of understanding God. And they bowed their heads to seek forgiveness and a deeper understanding. Theologian Rebecca Parker said in a lecture here at this church a few years ago, "When our experience of the world conflicts with our ideas about God and our religion, we have three choices. We can deny our experience and maintain our beliefs anyway. We can give up completely on religion or God. Or third, we can become theologians. In which case, we begin to think for ourselves about new ways of understanding what is ultimate that correspond with our own experience of life." Tillich, who was a Protestant theologian, rejected theism, and he spoke of God using the term ultimate concern. He said, "Whatever is of ultimate concern to a person is his God." So if fame or fortune or getting your next drink becomes your highest concern, that's become your God. He cautioned us to be careful what we hold as ultimate in our lives. And it's a good question for all of us, whether we're Christian or humanist or Buddhist or Jewish or some combination of these, or we're not sure what we are, to ask, what is of ultimate concern to me? And how does my life reflect those values? Because whatever it is, whatever we're willing to sacrifice for, is in essence our deity. Or as Ralph Waldo Emerson said, a person will have faith in something. I hope you know what it is for you. Let me offer a personal reflection before I close. 10 years ago, as many of you know, my 3-year-old daughter died. And when it happened, I was inundated by other people's theologies. Things like, God must have needed another little angel in heaven. Or, don't worry, you'll see her again and spend eternity with her. Or, everything happens for a reason. First, let me tell you, never say any of these things to someone who has just lost a child. But stepping back, I can see that on some level, if I were able to truly believe any of these things, it could have conceivably helped to ease my pain. But the pain of such a loss is inconceivable and unconsolable. And so I was stuck, having to look right into the face of such tragedy and pain and admit the fierceness and the senselessness and the unfairness and the pain of life. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, and there's no way I could have done it alone. But I'm convinced that my life today is full of purpose and passion and immense love and joy because I was willing to stare into the heart of my doubts and into the stark reality of death and the real possibility of meaninglessness. And like Tillich said, facing that emptiness, I discovered life's fullness. Encountering that negativity, I discovered a positive path forward. Embracing life's no's, I found my life's yes, affirmed and stronger than ever. Church, we are in a moment in American and world history when long-established ideas of how we do things and what we value is being put on trial. And the stakes are very high. The threats of fundamentalism and totalitarianism remain real, most powerfully in the form of terrorism, but increasingly in the ascent of authoritarian governments, including Russia and China. The nuclear threat remains real and proliferation continues. Cyber attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated and common. There is declining trust in American elections and American democracy. Global warming remains a life-threatening problem, so much so that the United States military sees it as a major cause of future wars. And while some of our politicians may question it, the military is preparing for it. What many of us value most is on trial. Pluralistic democracy, multicultural inclusion and equality for all, our rights under the Constitution of the United States, human rights under the Geneva Convention. Earth and its inhabitants are under threat. What we need now are courageous people who are not afraid to question and doubt and resist. People who will look at the world with sober eyes and who will stand up peacefully for what they believe is right. In a world where the parameters of right and wrong are in contention, it takes courage to stand up for what we believe is just. In a world where money and military might seem to rule, it takes courage to peacefully protest. There is a lot of uncertainty, but what seems certain is that hedonism and nihilism and fundamentalisms are major threats to our planet and to its people, especially to the most vulnerable people. I haven't met anyone yet who has all the answers regarding what we need to do next. What I know is that we need communities of courageous and free-minded and loving people. We need you. We need each other. We need the one force that topples humans and governments. The one force that even death cannot diminish. The one force that causes people to sacrifice for it, that causes people to even go against their own self-interest. We need love. We need communities of courageous love, and we need it now more than ever. Amen.
We are your church, and we are proud to be your church, or at least a church that's having a positive impact on your life. I am personally blessed to be your minister, or at least a minister who you're allowing to speak into your life. I hope you'll support our ministry and share your love beyond belief by texting LOVEBB to 41444 or go to our website. But you can just text LOVEBB to 41444 and make your gift. It's wonderful. Thank you. Be blessed and be a blessing.